You can now hear Movie Heaven Movie Hell on Stitcher. Stitcher is radio on demand. Listen anytime, anywhere. Stitcher is an award-winning free app that lets you listen to all your favourite shows, plus discover from 20,000 news, entertainment and sports shows. You can also create your own custom playlists. Stitcher is available on iOS, Android, Nook, iPad and in over 4 million car dashboards. It's on demand and it's on the go. No downloading, no syncing, no wasted memory. You can stream your favourite podcasts from Stitcher. Don't have Stitcher? Download it free today at Stitcher.com or in the App Store. And please leave us a review and rating on Stitcher. Thank you. Welcome to Movie Heaven Movie Hell with me, Simon Aitken, and
I'm Keith Eyles, and we are both independent filmmakers who enjoy discussing genre movies and related media. And for this special bonus episode, we are really pleased to welcome a guest to the show. We are joined by Mike from the Evolution of Horror podcast. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
It's always good to get people who are interested in horror on our show. So maybe you could start, for the benefit of our listeners, telling us a little bit about yourself, the podcast that you run, and your relationship with the horror genre, please.
Yeah, sure. Well, I work in TV mostly, sort of day to day. I do sort of work behind the camera, TV producing really, but they tend to be programs on film, art, that kind of thing. So I produce the BBC One film show, Film 2018, the thing that Barry Norman did for years, which is still on the air. I sort of produce that. But I am a massive horror fan. I have always been a huge horror fan my whole life. And so last year I just thought I would start up my own podcast, basically talking about the horror genre. So yeah, as you say, Evolution of Horror. It's kind of it's a standard sort of film discussion podcast, I suppose, but it also adds in a kind of slight historical slant as well, where we kind of track the horror genre through time, I suppose. We pick a particular subgenre like the slasher movie or the zombie movie, and we review a film from that subgenre each week in chronological order to sort of track how it changes over the years. So yeah, started doing that last year. I couldn't actually find anyone who was willing to sort of, or could commit the time to do this podcast with me every week. So I've ended up kind of roping different people in for different episodes, essentially. So it's kind of a weekly discussion podcast with me joined by a different guest each time, essentially.
I was just going to say, you just finished going through all the slasher films, is that right?
That's right. Yeah. That was really fun, actually. We sort of covered everything from week to week across about 15 weeks, from sort of early stuff like Psycho and Peeping Tom through to the sort of Giallo stuff of the 70s. And then, of course, Halloween and the big 80s slasher boom, to the 90s slasher boom, and sort of various different things in the 21st century, sort of different incarnations of slashers like torture porn and It Follows and things like that. So that was really fun, actually. Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, no, it has been interesting to sort of follow that history with you. I've been kind of following along with it as well. And you're also an avid Fright Fester as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I try and go whenever I can, and I've sort of done a bit of work with Fright Fest as well. So last year I was sort of there more in an official capacity, doing sort of press interviews and that kind of thing for Fright Fest TV, Fright Fest YouTube channel and that sort of thing. So that was great, actually. But it did mean that I missed some of the screenings and some of the films. I love Fright Fest. I love being there. I love the atmosphere. Yeah.
Mm. Oh yeah, we're both Fright Festers. I've been going for what must be like 10 years now. Yeah, at least 10 years.
Fantastic.
And it was great to be at the Empire again, and all of us more or less being in the same screen.
Yeah, so great. And it's lovely being back in that Empire. I don't know whether that screen was almost too big for a certain sort of low budget indie horror movies, you know. But it was amazing. It was lovely to all be together, like you say.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. Though if you were sitting at the front, it must have hurt your neck a bit. Cause,
yes,
yeah,
I can imagine. Yeah. Mm.
I had seats off to the back right-hand side, and Keith, you were sort of more the top middle, weren't you?
Yeah, pretty much the back row, which
Yeah.
was a fantastic place, view wise for all the films. So it's great. And off to the Glasgow one for the second year in a row as well. In March. So
I haven't.
So
I've never done them. That's great. Yeah, I've never done the Glasgow one. I would like to. I'm definitely going to try and make the trip to do that at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's all in one screen and a bit more sort of intimate. I mean, people say, I've only been going to Fright Fest for like the last 5 years, so I'm a novice compared to Simon and some of our other friends. But a lot of people say that the Glasgow one has kind of the atmosphere of the old school London one when it was just at the Prince Charles cinema before it got really big, basically.
Sure. So, yeah, definitely. And see, sometimes that's a little bit more manageable that way as well. It's less of an intimidating amount of films that you want to try and tick off and cover.
Yeah. No, it's a massive subject. Well, as you're finding, basing an entire podcast around it, and I like the fact that you're kind of doing it in subgenres, because that is the thing with horror, is there are so many subgenres that fall under the banner of horror that it's very hard to keep track. And I think dividing it up the way that you've done and sort of following the history in sort of chronological order through that is quite a good way to follow it. And I know I've been sort of following along with you, and I've been watching films that I A, haven't seen in years, or B, haven't seen at all. And it's been sort of great to discover stuff that way. So and because you've had some quite knowledgeable guests on as well, that's obviously helped it along also. So
definitely. Yeah, that's it. I'm the same. I don't really pretend to have seen everything compared to some horror fans out there. And actually, it's just been really nice for me too to kind of make myself a little to watch list, and then also go and talk to people a lot cleverer than myself, like Kim Newman, and just kind of let them do the hard work in terms of this sort of analysis and that kind of thing.
Well, hey, if anyone's going to analyze it, it's going to be Kim Newman.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
So what was the first slasher film then, historically?
Well, it depends. It depends what you count as a kind of, I guess, pure and simple absolute slasher. You'd say things like Black Christmas or Halloween, really. But before that, obviously, you did have Psycho, which you wouldn't really call an absolute straightforward slasher movie, but it also obviously has all those elements, somebody getting stabbed to death in the shower and that kind of thing. And it's the same with Peeping Tom the same year. It's not an absolute kind of follow the exact formula of a slasher, but it does have a man going around at night with his big phallic blade stabbing women to death, so you've got all of that kind of thing. If you go back even beyond that, you've got those kind of Agatha Christie and Then There Were None body count movies, which is kind of, a whole story structured around bodies piling up one by one, and it's kind of guess who the murderer is. So there's all those kind of early examples that all have sort of traits and tropes. But I'd say Black Christmas or Halloween really are the two sort of absolute pure slashers.
Which one was you started off your slasher season with then?
It was Psycho. Was the first kind of proper, full in-depth review was Psycho. So sort of Psycho and Peeping Tom back to back.
I also kind of like your analysis because, I really do urge people to listen to this podcast of yours because, there were lots of questions as to what qualifies as a slasher. Like, does Texas Chainsaw Massacre qualify, for example, and you moved into the Saw franchise as well, which some people argue is and some people argue isn't. So I think that's what's kind of interesting, is it's quite nuanced, and it is sometimes really, really difficult to pinpoint where some of these films live.
Absolutely. I think some of us live and die. Exactly. Some of that. Yeah, I had a lot of feedback about, for one thing, not including Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because I don't really see it as a slasher. And the same with Candyman. A lot of people said, why the hell haven't you included Candyman? Again, I don't really see it as a slasher movie. And then I did include movies like Saw and Final Destination. And again, a load of people kind of disagreed with me on that. So, it does all come down to your opinion as well. That's the thing. But it's kind of also, as the title suggests, about the evolution and how it changed and what the slasher became as well.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I mean, as you know, our podcast primarily, although we have lots of branch off episodes, but primarily our podcast is, hence the title, Movie Heaven, Movie Hell. So what the little challenge we set you, and I bet it was probably hard, was we asked you to pick your favorite and least favorite slasher film. So
yeah, because Keith won't say hell.
Well, I tend to be a bit forgiving of everything, which is my problem.
Sure. So, yeah. No, of course, it is difficult. It is difficult to kind of pick an absolute favorite, and also, especially with the slashers, to be honest, to say one that is the worst of all of them, because there are a lot of bad ones. Truth be told,
there are so many. Yes.
So I went for, it was very easy for me to pick my favorite, actually, but for the least favorite, it was a tricky one, and I'm sure there are actually movies worse than this, but this is a big, well-known one that I think is just quite fun to talk about, and it kind of brings up a sort of broader conversation about what the slasher movies became, this is kind of the pinnacle of.
Okay, fair enough. Well, what was I going to say? In that case, let's dive into it. So if you want to tell us what your heaven pick we usually start with is, and we'll have a chat about that one and see where we go from there.
Sure, yeah. So my heaven pick, my favorite slasher movie ever, really, is Black Christmas. So 1974, the original Black Christmas, directed by Bob Clark, which is, I think it's more well known these days, but I think for a long time it was this forgotten gem. It was the movie that came before Halloween that pretty much established all of the tropes that Halloween did a few years later. You've got this house full of sorority girls. It's Christmas. You've got this crazy lunatic lurking in the attic. He's calling them. They're receiving all these sort of menacing phone calls, very kind of Scream-esque phone calls. And then he's sort of picking them off one by one. So it's that sort of classic slasher format, really. Very simple, but really, really beautifully done, I think.
Yes. And of course, we will be delving into spoilers, but the thing is that they never capture the guy.
They don't.
No.
I mean, this is the thing. It's, for me, this movie has a kind of tone and atmosphere that a lot of the latest slasher movies completely lose, which I'll go into when we talk about the hell side of things.
Yes.
But I think as they went on, slasher movies became more and more of a joke, of a self-parody, really. And of course, Halloween is a masterpiece and it's terrifying. For me, Black Christmas is even more terrifying. There's something about it. It's that setting. It's the cinematography. It's this kind of, it's almost got this kind of fireside ghost story gothic feel to it, as well as having this kind of slasher maniac. And it has good characters as well. That's the other thing. I think, we'll get into it, but some of the characters are a lot more well drawn and a lot less cardboard cutout than you get in later slasher movies.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I have to say, my Christmas Eve viewing last year, Christmas just gone, was in fact, I did watch, because I was listening to this podcast, so I did watch Black Christmas. I watched the 74 version, and then I watched the 2006 remake or reimagining afterwards. So I did do a back-to-back on that. But it's a funny thing thinking about slashers, because recently, we did a podcast about, sort of growing up and being part of the Star Wars generation, and how we felt almost lucky, even though we always want to be younger. We felt kind of lucky to have grown up in that sort of boom of sci-fi movies and television through the 80s. And it's weird because it's a similar thing with the slasher movie, really. We kind of grew up in that era where, the home video era, where slasher was massive, and it was sort of kicked off by Black Christmas / Halloween, in the mid to late 70s. But then kind of grew into this thing throughout the 80s and into the early 90s, where there were just so many of these films coming out all of the time. And, it was quite an exciting time. And the whole home video was sort of part of that, because we were obviously too young to go and see them at the cinema, certainly in the early part of that. So it would be that sort of thing. You'd get them on home video, and it was a little bit naughty because you weren't really supposed to be watching it, and all of this sort of thing. And it grew from there. But I think it's quite an interesting, time that this happened.
It is. It's such an interesting era, and it's such a clear, compared to a lot of other horror subgenres, which is a little bit more loose, and it's such a clear, simple format that is so quickly developed and completely kind of completely evolved within a few months almost of Halloween. When Halloween, obviously, it was such a cheap format to make, and it made so much money, and like you say, it's timed at the same time as this video boom that suddenly movies like Friday the 13th and all of those millions of other imitators came out that were just, the same thing again and again and again, just bodies piling up, girls getting their boobs out, getting stabbed to death by a masked lunatic. And they seem to make lots and lots of money, and teenagers absolutely lapped them up at the time,
Yeah, perfect for an adolescent audience. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you don't really have to think much. You kind of switch your brain off and just enjoy all the visceral thrills, I suppose.
Absolutely.
It sounds a bit like the found footage craze we went through years ago. Where it was, where it's like you have a set way of doing it. That these people who are filming themselves on the holiday, on the expedition, whatever, they're going to go through hell, and they're not going to make it at the end. Something always nasty is going to happen to them. So it's,
I think that's right. I think those kind of found footage, that post Paranormal Activity era, was kind of the equivalent to that 80s slasher boom, really, for the sort of millennials. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. So what was it about, or what is it about Black Christmas in particular that kind of resonates with you personally?
I think it's a couple of things. I mean, first of all, I think it's partly me just wanting to kind of shout from the rooftops about it, because I feel like it doesn't get its due a lot of the time. And like I say, it's Halloween, and I'm not dissing Halloween. I think Halloween is pretty much a perfect horror movie as well. But I think Black Christmas, Halloween has the reputation of being the original slasher, and Black Christmas is, and it did all of these things that Halloween does just as brilliantly as Halloween does. And I think, whereas later slashers of the 80s relied more on gore and blood and guts and boobs, and that's pretty much it. And that's fine, and that's great fun. But Black Christmas is actually a really well-directed 2 hours of suspense. It really takes its time, and it's got a lot of build-up. It's got these kind of menacing phone calls, and then you spend a lot of time with these characters, with these girls. And again, these girls are not just lambs for the slaughter. They're not just these cardboard cutouts. They each have their own personality, their own issues, their own little arc happening. You've got one played by Margot Kidder, who is this kind of alcoholic, and then you've got this main girl, Jess, who, again, a slasher kind of established this trope of the main girl, the final girl, being the virgin, the pure one, and all of the other sort of promiscuous girls are punished and killed. And again, this kind of breaks all the rules before they're even established. You've got this central final girl who is, very smart, very resourceful, very sexually active. She's talking about getting an abortion. I mean, it's actually quite progressive and feminist at the same time. It's got all of this other stuff going on, so much more kind of subtext and interesting character stuff going on. But then also, it's just a brilliant slasher film. It is genuinely scary. And the serial killer, the sort of lunatic, the villain, who we don't really know much about. All we know is we think his name might be Billy. He might have some kind of split personality thing. He's this kind of wailing lunatic, really properly unhinged. Not like the kind of silent, shadowy types like Michael Myers who just sort of stand in doorways. This guy is an absolute loon who really has this kind of menacing presence, and yet we are revealed so little about him, which makes him even more terrifying. And it's just got some fantastic set pieces, some brilliant kill scenes as well. But it's just perfectly paced and perfectly pitched, I think.
Yeah. I must admit, though, I did feel that it does lose its way slightly in the middle. When you get that sort of bit with John Saxon is obviously the wonderful John Saxon is one of the detectives, but you get that whole bit when they're at the they're in the police precinct, and then the guy has that sort of laughing fit over the joke and things of that nature. And it did to me feel slightly, I mean, I agree, all the sort of soapy elements, if you want to call it that, of the relationships with all the different girls and what's going on in their life sort of outside of this killer in the attic, as it were, is great. But I did sort of feel that pacing wise, is just for me, I did feel it kind of lost its way a little bit in the middle. I mean, do you think that's fair or
yeah, I do. I think that's totally fair. It does have a lull in the middle, and I guess I see it as just a great chunk of character development, which then when you get to the final act adds all the more kind of threat and scare, because we've actually spent so much time with these girls, with these characters, and we've got to know them a little bit better. But you're right, it is structurally a bit of a strange one, because it has a really kind of creepy first sort of 20-30 minutes, and the last act is really terrifying. But yeah, there is this kind of strange, it does descend into like a kind of almost just comedy teen movie for a section in the middle, and it's directed by Bob Clark, who made, I think, Porky's, and so it's got that kind of Porky's middle act in a weird way. But for me, it still has these moments. It's whenever they step back into the house and we're suddenly, even when nothing is happening, we still get this kind of killer point of view from the attic, or we'll just get these strange, long, shadowy corridors, or we'll every now and then just cut away to a glimpse of this body in a rocking chair in the attic, while this kind of soapy stuff is going on downstairs. So for me, it always has something. It still has that underlying tension, because that even though all this silly stuff is going on, there's still a lunatic 3 floors above them waiting to pounce this entire time, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the sorority house and the phone calls in particular are very creepy. And in terms of atmospherics, if you were looking at the genre, it's almost like a sort of masterclass in itself as to sort of how to set all of that up, because I think that film does do that extremely well. I mean, I would say that Halloween also, has this massive chunk in the middle where all these irritating teenage girls are walking home from school talking about who to bring to the prom and what's going to happen here, and sneakily smoking pot and not letting the policeman dad catch them smoking pot. And, I think all of these movies have that element to them where they do descend into, basically Clueless, but with kills, essentially. I suppose the only difference is that, for a lot of Halloween, you're still, he still plonks Michael Myers in the background watching over them the whole time, which kind of adds something. And you're right, Black Christmas does have that kind of element where the horror just kind of disappears for a short while. Yeah, I'm slightly biased because Halloween is personally my favourite of all time.
Absolutely. Movies, but, yeah, I mean, it's everyone's, I mean, that's the thing we did at the end of our slasher series, like kind of poll of listeners, online and email and that kind of thing of, favourite slasher film. And of course, Halloween by 100 million miles was the winner, followed by Nightmare on Elm Street. And then I think Black Christmas was third. And, Halloween is everyone's favourite. And I do get it. I do think it's pretty much a perfect movie, but I like to be the spokesperson for Black Christmas whenever I can.
Yeah, hey, I'm just common.
That's right.
What about you, Simon?
When we spoke about this, I said Halloween, but I have a great fondness for Scream.
I love Scream.
And the thing about Scream I like was the opening act with where the whole do you like scary movies, and how that just builds up. And I love the fact that that she still got killed even though her parents were there, because as a kid, if you were ever scared, your parents were there and everything was fine. They were the ones to save you. So the fact that Wes Craven sort of undermined that, said, well, you know what, kids, your parents might be there, but if that killer's around, there's no helping you. They literally can be round the corner, and you're still gonna die. And so that just opening scene sort of hooked me and sort of has stayed with me a lot. I mean, it's quite funny, and of course it's very meta, talking about the rules and never split up, never say I'll be right back, anything like that. And it's the killer is kind of bumbling in some sense. I mean, a lot of the time they get he gets kicked in the groin and you see him crawling over, but then he still is able to kill them. And
exactly, yeah.
But I mean, Halloween is so great because it is so suspenseful, and that suspense it just keeps building, even though, as you say, Michael Myers doesn't do much, and a lot of the time it is just atmosphere. I mean, it's with the first kill with the girl when she goes out to the car and then comes back in and walks around the house, and all the time you're like, when's it going to happen? When's it going to happen?
Yeah.
And that tension
absolutely.
just keeps building up. The same like in Jaws, when's the shark going to appear? When you're going to hear that music? And when that music comes along, you're just, you're then really on the edge of your seat.
Yeah. I think that's what Halloween and Black Christmas, and also Scream brought back, which is the element of suspense. It's what Hitchcock introduced with things like Psycho. That element, it's the build up is as important as the kill, and that is what completely gets lost from, I think, Friday the 13th onwards, and it becomes more about, let's just absolutely celebrate and make the kills as gory and lavish as possible, and not worry so much about the suspense or the build up.
Well, exactly. Yeah. You've gone from like sort of masters like Hitchcock and Carpenter, who really build on that, to like you said, people that are just then going for excessive gore and outlandish kills, etc. Which, hey, there's nothing wrong with that too. It all has its place, and it's all good fun.
Absolutely.
Well, it's the kind of thing that drives the market. As you say, it's a teenage market, and teenage kids, I don't think they like. Well, maybe I'm not speaking for them, but it to the film producers and makers of a lot of these slasher films, it's like, they want more gore, they want more blood, because every time we up it, more people come to see the films. And I remember when I was a teenager or when I was a kid, you would always have that one friend whose parents would let him watch whatever he want, and you'd be so jealous of him, and he'd come in and he'd tell you these great stories about these films and these kills, which years later, when you finally saw these films, it's like, what was he talking about? where was this stuff? I was going to say, I still want to see this film where a guy had like 3 machine guns attached together and just going around killing people, with these 3 machine guns. And it's like, I still never seen this film. I don't know what he was talking about. It sounded great.
I was going to say, it sounds like something we should make. Yeah. But,
definitely.
One of the things actually on your podcast as well that you delved into, I mean, obviously you did this over sort of 10 episodes or 12 episodes or whatever it was, so you were able to go quite deep into this. But I found it very, very informative and interesting when you said about how when the slasher then sort of into the 90s started to sort of attract bigger name actors, as it were, or up and coming actors. But as a result of that, things like the nudity, for example, became less so, because suddenly you had sort of young star actors in it, as opposed to people that nobody knew and things of that nature. And I found that quite interesting, the way you said that, the genre changed based on the things that Simon was just talking about how some of the, execs and whatever wanted to push it more into the mainstream. And as a result, it kind of, well, one could say suffered as a result of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the kind of second wave, the second boom of slashers in the 90s became much less about the gore and much more about, I mean, if you look at even the posters or the video covers of early 80s slashers, and it's all about, knives and death and killers and blood and gore. And then when you look at posters for everything that happens Scream onwards, I Know What You Did Last Summer and Urban Legend and all those movies, it's basically just pictures of all of your favorite stars of Buffy and Dawson's Creek and things like that, just kind of in a line. And it's bringing back that more kind of, and then there were none, Agatha Christie style format of, we're just going to murder each of these one by one. One of them is going to be the killer, but we're not going to concentrate too much on the actual blood and guts itself. It's going to be more on the sort of mystery element, I suppose. Yeah, and they're much cleaner. Yeah, you much less nudity, much less gore, and any of that kind of stuff. I suppose just much easier for studios to market. Yeah.
Yeah, much easier to get that 15 certificate as opposed to the 18 or whatever. So
yeah, exactly. And I think that was something that Wes Craven unintentionally started with Scream, because he did make a gory classic slasher movie, but it also happened to have a lineup of Drew Barrymore, Courtney Cox, Nev Campbell, all these people on the front cover, which is what launched it.
I'm also right in saying that at that point as well, sort of video stores were kind of coming to an end. There was less, we had DVD being introduced and video stores were closing, and also the slasher market mostly was direct to videos, so the whole artwork was always a way of grabbing people's attention without necessarily they knowing the film or seeing it. So it's kind of, again, it's that sort of marketplace changed where it was, as you say, more about the stars and less about presenting a sort of great looking image that will set it apart from all the others on the video shelf.
Definitely, yeah. And I remember that's the era I grew up in, and I remember just walking around Blockbuster, at the late 90s as a kid, just wanting to pick all the ones that looked like horror films with all my favourite TV stars in them, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We often go back on this podcast with our fond memories of the sort of home video era, which is obviously now behind us. Now we've got the on-demand and streaming era, but it is different. Yes, it's not now an effort to go out and go somewhere and look on shelves at physical boxes and physical posters, and it very much has changed. It's very. I
know, and I do. We talked about that a lot as well on my podcast, and it is something that I think a lot of people miss. The and it's weird because it's a kind of you miss doing it. You miss walking around and picking up a really cool looking video box of something you've never heard of and bringing it home, and it was kind of a surprise. Although at the same time, so often they ended up being terrible and not as good as the front cover would suggest. So I don't know if we're actually better off now or not. Now that you can easily go online and read reviews and watch trailers before you actually watch anything,
Yeah, it's still happening. Apparently, I heard a really weird statistic the other day. I was at the Horror on Sea Festival because I had a couple of films showing at that. Yeah, and one of the statistics that came out on a talk was in 2006 there would be one horror film a month which would go straight to what they call straight to video, like one film a month. Whereas now for the on demand and streaming, there are 16 a month that go straight to that. So it just shows you in terms of audience and what audience wants, that marketplace hasn't got any smaller. If anything, it's grown. And
absolutely,
it is interesting when you kind of look at the consumer side of it and and society side of it, which is obviously a massive topic in its own thing, but the fact that people do still want to go out and see this type of content. So
definitely, and actually some of the best stuff I've seen of recent years has been random stuff I've just come across on Netflix. Movies like The Invitation or Hush and things like that went straight to on demand and were brilliant. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, and we mentioned there briefly, and I know you kind of went, but obviously Black Christmas did get a remake in the mid noughties.
Yes.
And I take it from your reaction, you weren't a fan of that at all, no?
No. In my head, that movie doesn't exist. There is no remake. No, I think it kind of lost exactly everything that made, like so many of those remakes did around that era. It kind of completely lost sight of what made the original so scary and so weird and so creepy and engaging. And none of it really worked for me. And also I feel like Black Christmas was so much a product of his time. It was all about tracing that, who could have thought that the person calling you was actually the person inside the house. And now, of course, in the 21st century, of course that can happen. You can have anyone stood with a mobile phone right outside your door, calling you, and that's not a twist, that's not a surprise. So yeah, it kind of lost everything that made the original so brilliant and unique for me.
Yeah. Well, I think it suffered as well from one of those things where, sometimes filmmakers that are so passionate about an original piece shouldn't necessarily go back and remake it. Because what I understand was Glenn Morgan, who, had obviously worked on the X-Files and the Final Destination series of films, which, again, you cover and I'm a fan of, I have to say.
Yeah.
But he remade Black Christmas because he had such, the original one was such a seminal film for him. He was a massive fan of it. And I think it's almost a little bit like, Gus Van Sant remaking Psycho. It's kind of, well, just because you want to doesn't mean you should.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. It's not always a good thing when you get a director who's just a giant fanboy. That's not always a good thing, I don't think.
No. I mean, they're capable filmmakers in both those examples I've given.
Sure.
But remaking what they love hasn't necessarily worked in this particular instance. But it was interesting to watch them back to back because they are actually quite different. The premise is the same, and there's a lot of visual iconography and homages to the original, but the actual structure of the film is quite different actually. So but didn't really quite deliver.
No,
it's not amazing.
No, that's it. Yeah, it's not great.
All right. Yeah. Well, I mean, is there anything else you want to add about Black Christmas as it's your heaven pick of slashers for all time?
No, I don't think so. Although it's also got probably my favorite, because slasher movies, they're all about the kill scenes, really. Crucially and most fundamentally, that is what they are. And it's got my favorite sort of kill scene in any slasher film, which is where Margot Kidder's character is murdered in her bed while the carol singers are all singing outside downstairs. And it's really well done, and it's kind of cut back and forth between these like little angelic children singing Silent Night. And this girl kind of trying to scream out but not being heard in her bedroom as this killer he grabs this kind of glass ornamental unicorn thing and stabs her to death with this kind of crystal glass unicorn. And it's really, I mean, it's very disturbing and gory, but also kind of weirdly beautiful as well in the way it's shot and looked, and just the way that it's kind of sort of weird, dreamlike, kind of queasy, the way it's all shot and lit with these children singing as it all happens. It's just brilliant. I love it. It is, as I say, that's my sort of favorite murder scene in my favorite slasher film.
Fabulous. No, I mean, it is very a very disturbing scene. Yes, which again they try and homage in the remake, but it's not quite as engaging. But,
no, to put it lightly, no.
But it's there. At least they went there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What about you, Simon? Anything you want to add about Black Christmas?
Just to say that the first time I saw it, it was a screening at the it was the Roxy Bar, and it was like a triple bill of Christmas horror films. So it was Black Christmas, it was Silent Night, Deadly Night, and then it was Gremlins.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic.
And so
what a great triple bill.
Yes. But it was a great start to sort of that triple bill. Though Silent Night, Deadly Night is a very fun film to watch. It's funny from the point of view where the guy you're following actually becomes the killer, and and monosyllabic killer as well.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, that's the thing. Like those other two movies, Gremlins and that, they're much more Christmassy. They're much more fun and festive. Black Christmas is almost, it doesn't really make a big deal out of the fact that it's Christmas. It's not really about Christmas, really. And actually, like, did you guys see at Fright Fest last year that film Better Watch Out?
Fantastic. I really
amazing
enjoyed it.
film, absolutely
Yes.
fantastic.
Oh yes, yeah.
That's one of my new sort of favorite Christmas movies. I think that's up there. And again, that's like properly festive and Christmassy, even though it's really disturbing.
I recommended that to so many of my friends to see this Christmas season just gone. I said to them, I've got friends that really like horror, and I said to them, just go and watch this film. You'll really have fun with it, and make sure you sit through the credits. That was it. And they took my advice, and everybody came back with thumbs up. So I was like,
yeah,
it's great fun.
Yeah, such a shame the release of it. It seemed to come and go very quickly.
Yeah, I know. I think it's going to be one of those movies that will grow over time. It's going to become a sort of word of mouth cult favorite. That's what I reckon.
Yeah. It was such a shame because I remember at Fright Fest there was such a build up over it, wasn't it? And they were like, "Oh, don't tell people what happens. It's just between us. Don't ruin the surprise."
Exactly.
And
exactly.
Not many people saw it, so.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things. It feels odd to watch a Christmas movie and the August bank holiday weekend, but at the same time, I completely went with it, and thoroughly enjoyed it. That was one of the highlights of last year's Fright Fests. Actually, for me, was that film was definitely in the what I would say the top 10 for sure.
Yeah, me too, for definite. Yeah,
it was a very strong year.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so that's your movie Heaven then. So right at the other end of the spectrum, and we know it's quite a big spectrum with the slasher film.
Yes.
But what would you put then as your movie Hell?
Okay, well, my movie Hell is a difficult choice, but I've gone with Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare, which is I think the 6th in the Nightmare on Elm Street series from 1991. And this was, obviously heavily marketed as this is the final one, the final Nightmare film. Freddy finally dies, is put to rest, and it was actually sort of, I think it was in 3D as well when it first came out, full of gimmicks basically, and all about that side of it, I suppose, all about the kind of marketing side of it. On this date, see Freddy die and see it in 3D and blah blah blah. I think a movie much more about how they could market it than actually about the content itself, because I remember being very excited to watch this when I was a kid, and I rented it out, and you could rent it at the time from Blockbuster with your 3D glasses, the kind of green and red kind of crappy 3D glasses that you could put on when you watched it. And even the sort of 11-year-old me thought that this movie was total trash, like really pretty abysmal from beginning to end, really. Just where to start, really. I mean, it's terrible.
Well, this is where, I mean, by this point, and I'm quite a big fan of the Nightmare on Elm Street series of films, but really,
me too.
For me, it was always about like the first 3. And then I also really enjoyed Wes Craven's Final Nightmare, which was kind of the film within the film that followed this one. And to be honest, the 3 in the middle kind of all sort of merge into one to me, because this is where Freddy had gone from being initially quite scary to being kind of like almost like a sort of stand-up comedian slapstick type character. He'd become like a celebrity in his own right by this stage, and this film and the 2 preceding it really sort of played on that whole idea. And but this one, I'm sad to admit that this one was actually the first one that I saw actually in the theater, in the cinema, because the previous installments I'd been, obviously too young to go and see at the cinema, and what had watched on home video, and was like I said, quite a fan of. So this one I was quite excited to actually go to the cinema and watch it. And you're absolutely right, they totally played on this gimmick of the 3D. It was again in a period where we hadn't had 3D in some time, and obviously we hadn't got to the age we live in yet, where pretty much everything's released in 3D. So it was a real gimmick, and they actually, in terms of the marketing, they actually did it quite well. But the trouble was the actual product itself wasn't that great, in the fact that it was your typical, obviously you had the visual cue in the film with Billy Zane's sister, I can't remember her name, but literally putting on the 3D glasses. Yes. So you had your prompt to put them on, which again, in a cinema environment with the audience was kind of a cool thing. But then it really did fall into the, rather than dealing with depth and stuff, it was all about stuff flying at you, like those three demons that created Freddy, coming out at you, and literally them throwing knives and picking up a knife and going, oh, this could be good, and waving it at the camera and stuff like that. So of course, when you watch it in 2D, which I did for this podcast, I watched the Blu-ray of it, and it just looks ludicrous.
It does.
So,
it does. It loses everything. Absolutely everything. If you're not watching it in that environment, what's the point, basically?
Well, exactly. And also the other thing, this came out in 91, and in terms of the horror genre, this kind of suffered big as well, because this came out at the same time that you had real quality horror films like Silence of the Lambs and Misery, which we talked about both of those on previous podcasts. But they came out the same year as this, so you really did sort of have both ends of the spectrum in terms of horror quality.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we did a whole kind of section on this in our podcast about the slashers. And this was a weird kind of dead zone for horror, weirdly, even though, you had one of the only ever, Best Picture winner horror movies in history. You also had all this crap coming out. You had Jason Goes to Hell and Freddy's Dead and Leprechaun and all of these like ridiculous, terrible. I mean, the early 90s really, very broadly, if you don't count things like Silence of the Lambs, was a pretty dead time for horror, I think. And also the Freddy's Dead is a kind of absolute epitome of what the slashers sort of devolved into, I suppose. That suddenly this kind of studio-led gimmicky stuff went further than the actual sort of artistic content, I suppose. And that by this point, all of these franchises were in their sort of 6th, 7th, 8th entries. And it was all about kind of the gimmick, or what can we do now? Send them into space. Let's bring out action. Let's bring out action figures. Let's have a TV series. Let's have a video game of Freddy. Let's get, kids dressing up as them. These characters that, Freddy Krueger was this terrifying thing that Wes Craven had, created to be this kind of ultimate nightmarish figure that is that nightmarish figure in the first one. And then it's like, all of Wes Craven's work has just been completely shit on by Freddy's Dead. It's just this absolute parody of himself. Like you say, he's this celebrity figure now who kind of makes wisecracks and then sort of, runs off or whatever. And it's just, there's nothing left of the original franchise in this film. There's no suspense. There's no scares. There's no creation. There's creativity. It's all gone by this point to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, Freddy originally was a child murderer, and by the time you get to this point, he's the son of 1,000 maniacs. It's just like the original one is believable, horrible, and the 1,000 maniacs. It's just so out there that you just kind of you can just laugh at it. It's just like, oh, okay. That sounds cool, but...
Yeah, exactly. And equally, like I said, Black Christmas has one of my favourite ever kill scenes. This has one of my worst, which is where Freddy Krueger kind of puts a kid inside a video game, like a Nintendo NES video game.
Yeah.
And he sits in an armchair and wears a power glove, and then just kind of like, we kind of go into this stupid 2D computer game where this kid is getting sort of stamped on and hit with frying pans and stuff. And it's like, what's happened? This was the film where the girl was dragged and cut open happen on the ceiling in the first one, and now we're watching a NES game. It's like, what has happened? You know?
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, kind of ironically, I actually, when I rewatched this, I kind of fell asleep during that part. Something you should obviously never do in a Nightmare on Elm Street film.
I mean, that says it all. That says it all.
But yeah, I wound it back, and I was like, oh, for heaven's sake, I'd forgotten this bit. I'd erased that bit from my memory because, you know, it is really bad. And I think this is one of the problems with, you know, we've talked about this in other franchises as well, but certainly one of the things they've done with Freddy here, which I think is demystify the character, because by giving all this backstory and explaining, you know, that these three demons, you know, these things that could obviously fly out the screen at the audience and go around everywhere, but these three demons were the things that chose him and created him in the first place. And it's all a little bit really, we didn't need to know that, because I mean the whole point of the supernatural aspect of Freddy, you know, existing in our dreams and stuff was meant artistically you could kind of do anything with it because it's a dream, so rules don't apply so much.
Exactly.
But also it made it truly scary because we all have to sleep, right? You know, we all have to dream, and suddenly they're given like his whole backstory and you know, explaining how he was formed and how he was created and therefore how they can kill him. And, you know, taking that, well, it's a dream, we can do anything, to the extreme of, like you said, playing a sort of stupid video game with one of the characters and having him bouncing up and down stairs and stuff. And it just like suddenly you were laughing out loud at it as opposed to being somewhat creeped out by it. And exactly. Made a big difference to the franchise for sure. Yeah, I think this film's probably not. It's not totally this film's fault, because if memory serves, and I haven't rewatched them lately, but I think the two films prior to this kind of started doing that as well. I seem to remember one where Freddy was surfing on a beach or something and had like Ray-Ban Wayfarer glasses on and stuff. And
that was number 4. Film. No, that was Dream Masters. That I remember that from the trailer, where you see his hand flying through the sand as if it's like a shark. You know, the blades. And he does the whole. He's got the sunglasses, and he clicks open his glove. You know, hi, it's Freddy. You know. Yeah.
So I mean, they started doing it then. You know, long before this, and obviously there was the TV series, and like you said, the Todd McFarlane action figures, and you know all of that sort of. So it became about the merchandising rather than the story itself, and I think that's where this film suffers for sure. I think you're right. And Freddy had been this for a few films now. I think part 3 was the turning point. I love part 3, actually, the Dream Warriors one, but you can see there are moments there where it's like he'll go, "Oh, welcome to prime time, bitch," and all this kind of stuff, and he'll start saying these little one-liners, and that is then what they begin to push and push and push. But I think this was the real bottom of the barrel. This one was worse than all the others. And you're right. I think I think the problem with all these franchises is they had to keep making more, and by making more, it meant they had to somehow expand on the mythology or give these characters backstories. And suddenly we were learning that Michael Myers was the creation, of some cult, and Freddy Krueger, was the son of 1,000 maniacs. And actually, linking this back to my movie Heaven, the best part about the killer in Black Christmas is that you know nothing about him, and that is what all of these movies had lost by this point. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Well, that's it. It's what makes things scary is the unknown. If you don't know anything about this character, then you don't know what they're going to do or what they're capable of. So as you say, as he goes along with each film, it just demystifies him and makes him, this fun character. I mean, he's a beloved character. People do love Freddy, and I think they love him because of this, him being wisecracking and. Just
kung fu, bitch. In this one.
Oh God!
Oh, come on. But it's weird. I mean, I have to confess the whole. I mean, I love the first Nightmare on Elm Street, but I have to remember that whole thing was slightly ruined for me when I first saw it, because I saw it on home video, and one of my friends, Chris, who we've had on the podcast before, he had it and invited me over to watch it. And it's really, but this must have been about, I don't know, 1986, 1987. And the reason I say that is we didn't get the series, the miniseries V, until much later in the US, and we had it all sort of shown in one go. And the trouble is, I found out, because of course I was interested in films and actors and directors and stuff. So of course I found out this guy that was Freddy Krueger also played Willy, the funny lizard alien that gets all his words wrong in the V franchise. And I was kind of like, oh shit! Suddenly, when I think about that, it shows what a great actor Robert Englund is, because But I was like, oh, suddenly I can't take Freddy Krueger is seriously now. And by the time they got to this film, they didn't want us to take him seriously, so it was fine.
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and I think that what the next film that you mentioned, you said you liked, I love as well, the Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I think that was Wes Craven then taking ownership back and sort of saying, you've ruined, like, this is not what I wanted from my creation, and he kind of makes Freddy scary again, and he reinvents him in the next one.
Well, he was kind of ahead of his. He was kind of ahead of his time by doing this whole sort of meta thing that he did.
Yeah, it's basically Scream, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not sure people were necessarily ready or open-minded enough for it at the time. I mean, it sounds like nothing now, but at the time that was kind of a big deal, and. It was very interesting. It's a way of him being in the film and Robert Shea being in the film and stuff. But I mean, you say about trying to take it back. I mean, I listened to an interview with him, and it was literally that, not just from a creative standpoint, but from a financial standpoint as well.
Yeah,
because obviously he had got nothing for the Nightmare on Elm Street sequels, and for this film was offered a lot of money to come back, first of all, but also, they had kind of ruined his creation, and they'd obviously killed his creation. And in fact, my memory completely got Freddy and and Jason sort of confused, because I was expecting to see in this film the bit where the glove grabs Jason's mask, but I'm guessing that's from the Jason franchise.
That's from the Jason film, yes.
That's Jason Goes to Hell.
Because I knew it was either Freddy's Dead or Jason Went to Hell was the one where they hinted at a crossover, and I couldn't remember which film it was. And when it got to the end of this, I was like, oh, it wasn't that one, it was the other one.
Both terrible films, both basically titles more than they are films, like one-liners before they are films.
I actually watched Jason Goes to Hell as well as watching this, and again, it was this sort of weird gimmick. So the first thing they do is they kill off Jason. So you kill off your main villain, and then you have it so that he swaps bodies, and it becomes this weird, like, invasion of the body snatchers.
Yeah.
And then in the end, he comes back, for about 10 minutes, just so he can be killed off properly. And then you sort of get the image of the glove. But I mean, this whole thing, when you finally see this creature that's been moving from person to person, it's this really weird, it's just this silly puppet, this demon puppet that's crawling around.
Yeah. It's terrible.
It's just awful. I mean, This
was kind of like the nail in the coffin of the slasher franchise before it then sort of came back with Scream. But this was it. This was where it was dying, I think, by the early 90s.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I have to say, for me, when they did try and reboot Nightmare on Elm Street with the remake of that, I personally thought that was awful. I mean, I guess most people did, hence why they didn't make any more of them.
Yeah.
But that was just like a terrible remake, in my opinion, of what was the original. Is still such a great film. And
100%. Yeah, it's brilliant.
I'll tell you, actually, something that really pissed me off with the Blu-rays is I've always had, I had the first 3 films on VHS back in the day. And then, in the early 2000s, New Line Warner did a really good Region 1 collection that kind of the spines made up a picture of Freddy. And
cool.
They had loads of extras. They even came with the 3D glasses for this particular movie.
Nice.
And it had loads of stuff on. And when it came out on Blu-ray, I repurchased the franchise yet again because it was supposed to have, and I'd never seen, it said, contains like 4 episodes from Freddy's Nightmares, the series, right? But what really pisses me off is those 4 episodes are not the ones that are about Freddy Krueger. So I'm like, what was the point of that? Apparently there was an episode, I've not seen it, where you see Freddy Krueger on trial, back in the, late 60s or whatever it is, where before the parents decide to sort of trap him in the school and burn him. Yeah, but you see, and there's a whole episode that deals with that, but it's not on the Ultimate Nightmare on Elm Street, Blu-ray collection. And I'm like, why have they, instead they put these random episodes that are called Freddy's Nightmares, but actually don't feature Freddy at all, apart from doing this kind of, Crypt Keeper style intro, which is really bad.
That's hilarious.
And I thought, why the hell did they, not put those episodes on the Blu-ray? But there you go. Somebody needs to do that show about Blu-rays at some point.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It's a minefield out there.
It is. It's a home media minefield.
It is, yeah. Oh, brilliant.
So anything else then about Freddy's Dead that we want to bring up? I mean, I'm reading some trivia, and apparently originally Peter Jackson had submitted a script to do this, but it was
that would have been much better.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. Of course, the other thing that's interesting about this was Rachel Tallahay's first, this is her directorial debut. And I've noticed since she's gone on to sort of mainly television, I know she's done some episodes of the sort of DC Arrowverse, programs in recent years. But this was actually sort of her first stab at this, having worked behind the scenes on some of the previous Nightmare on Elm Street films. So
yeah.
But she actually, I think it was her idea as well. So she didn't actually do the screenplay, but she came up with the original story idea for this and got to direct. So it did start her career, and she has gone on to do stuff since. So
yes, yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, I think there was a lot of potential with that movie, but it was probably just a case of it being rushed out, as part of this big never-ending franchise type stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose they were coming out every year, every couple of years at this.
Yeah. It's kind of like the Saw franchise was a bit about 10 years ago, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. Although I have to say, I think generally speaking, the quality of the Saw franchise was quite consistent.
Yes,
obviously the first film was the best, as they usually are, because nobody saw the twist coming and stuff. But yeah, I still thought that the actual subsequent films were very interesting and entertaining and well made. But that's a whole nother podcast.
It is, absolutely. It is. Yeah.
But so anything else we want to add about the final nightmare?
Well, I don't think there's much more to say on that movie.
Fair enough. So the next thing that you're focusing on now is the ghost story. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. Which is really nice, actually. It's a lovely break from slashers, I've got to say. Talking about kind of, it's interesting because, slashers are generally thought of by a lot of people, not horror lovers, but by a lot of people as kind of the lower end of the spectrum, the trashier end of the spectrum. I suppose because of movies like Freddy's Dead giving it that reputation. Whereas I think, ghost stories have this kind of much more esteemed sort of presence to them. You know, they cross over into, you know, even non-horror lovers can appreciate movies like The Orphanage and The Haunting and The Innocents and The Shining and all these types of movies. So yeah, that's what we're doing at the moment. We're kind of covering all of those movies from sort of the 50s onwards, basically.
Yeah, I'm going along with you on those ones. In fact, you know, we were saying about, you know, Freddy's Dead being in 3D and whatever. I found the one where you discuss William Castle and the work that he was doing in the 50s.
Yes,
as a sort of precursor to what Hitchcock did with Psycho, in fact.
Exactly.
And how he almost became a sort of celeb that was selling the gimmick over the film. Although I love House on Haunted Hill, I think that's a fabulous film. But,
great film, yeah.
But that's kind of interesting because some of his films were sort of dabbling in, well, 3D and you know, other sort of gimmicks to sell it. And you know, he was kind of the face of that. A little bit like on television, Rod Serling was doing with the whole Twilight Zone thing as well, about, you know, actually being the face of the franchise and introducing it and selling it to the audience, as it were. So
definitely, yeah. And actually, it's not unlike Freddy's Dead and these movies. You know, it's that classic kind of gimmick came before the story a lot of the time. And actually, House on Haunted Hill was brilliant. That was a really good movie. But we then reviewed another one alongside it, 13 Ghosts, which is pretty terrible. And actually, when you watch it now without the 3D, without all those gimmicks, it's nothing. I mean, it's barely even a film. So yeah, it's interesting.
Are we talking about the originals or the remakes?
Yeah, the originals from the 50s. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just because I've only seen the remakes, and I did enjoy the remake of House on Haunted Hill. That was
me
quite
too.
Good, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, those guys, I mean, that was when Zemeckis and co sort of started up the Zemeckis and Silver started up the whole Dark Castle thing, and you know, they were clearly fans of those films from the late 50s, 60s, and you can kind of see that because they are good remakes, good representations, as opposed to, you know, some of the stuff we talked about earlier. Although I guess I'm kind of contradicting myself there, because one of the things I was saying was the problem with Black Christmas was the maker was too close to the original, but then he directed it. He didn't just produce it. So
Yeah, exactly.
But that's cool. All right. Well, anything else, Simon, that you want to add?
No, not that I can think of. You know, like you guys, you know, I enjoyed the first three films, and you know, as a kid, they did scare me. But the sort of, I've not really seen the latter ones. There's I've never watched all of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. I will admit that now, and it's
Wow.
but I know enough about them to sort of, you know what happens, and you know, sort of kills and stuff. I've seen the very long documentary about the making of all those films, and I mean, I really enjoyed A New Nightmare. Second time viewing it, I think first time I watched it, it went over my head a lot. I was a teenager when I saw it when it first came out, and didn't quite get it. But revisiting it again recently, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the sort of the meta side of things, and you know, seeing you know, seeing all these actors and directors and playing themselves and trying to, you know, put this in the real world. You know, is really well done. But it was, as you say, when it came to sort of Freddy's Dead and Jason Goes to Hell, they kind of lost the steam. They just, you know, they had done it so much, it's like they couldn't think of anything else more to do apart from, you know, kill off the characters. Say, well, that, you know, that's it now. Let's bury these guys, and you know. But saying that, they both came back. I mean, you had you know, A New Nightmare, and you had Jason X, which again was kind of a reinvention where they made it more of a comedy.
It was good fun, actually.
There was a lot of fun. Yeah, there's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I kind of like that. I mean, it's we had a previous podcast where we had an episode to sort of celebrate the Stephen King season at the BFI and sort of commemorate the passing of Toby Hooper.
Yes.
And we were talking about, vampire films like Salem's Lot, fantastic. But we also talked about a vampire film called Dracula 3000, which has a similar premise to Jason X, but is just god terrible.
Yeah, awful.
So add that to your list.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yes, when you get onto the vampire films.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
God, there's a lot of ground to cover there. I mean, Twilight for one thing.
Yes. So Simon,
yeah.
If you said that Scream then is your slasher movie heaven, what is your slasher movie hell?
Well, I'd definitely say Jason Goes to Hell is my hell, and it was a hard watch. It was like you just kept rolling your eyes at everything that was going on, and
that's the one I fell asleep at the Friday the 13th all-nighter that they did at the Prince Charles.
Oh,
I think I did finally nap when it came to that one. So
Jason Takes Manhattan is great, but then the next one, Jason Goes to Hell, is
well, it is, but I mean the problem is that the whole him taking Manhattan's only like for the last 15 minutes.
Yeah, it's Jason goes on a boat. Really.
Yeah.
Jason does a cruise.
Exactly. Which is not as fun as once he gets into Manhattan. I mean, it's such a shame. It's such a waste of a film because the whole Manhattan bit's great, but it's like, oh, we've only got like 2 days to shoot here or something.
Yeah, again, the title and the poster promise a lot more than the film actually delivers.
Oh God, the trailer promised so much.
Yeah.
Especially when they did New York, New York.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a brilliant trailer to it, but unfortunately the film just not delivers.
No, it doesn't. And actually, while we're on that subject then, what do you guys both think of, because it is relevant, Freddy versus Jason?
Yeah, I don't mind it. It has its moments. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's kind of fairly well put together, I suppose. If you're going to kind of cram these two franchises somehow in the same world as each other, and the fact that suddenly Elm Street turned out to be about a 10-minute drive from Camp Crystal Lake or whatever, if you kind of put all that
everywhere
crap,
has an Elm Street, as they say.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. If you put all of that stuff aside, I mean, I thought it was quite good fun in a silly way.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it when it first came out, but sort of rewatching it recently, I just found it was awful. I couldn't really sit for it.
I haven't watched it since it first came out. Actually, I've got to admit.
Yeah, I haven't watched it in a long time either, but I did kind of enjoy it for what it was at the time. I mean, it's interesting because it's that film that started the versus films for the big screen. I mean, I know they'd been doing it in comic books and stuff for ages, but this was the first one that had done it in many years. Let's put it that way. I think they did it back in the monster movies at one point or something.
They did. But yeah, this was like the original Captain America Civil War.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got a lot to answer for. There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, it was something that was in the air at the time because a lot of comic books had done this kind of versus, especially Dark Horse comics. I mean, they did the original Aliens versus Predator, and you had like the Terminator versus RoboCop, and so a lot of studios were looking to sort of have like franchises go up against each other, but of course usually the franchises in question were owned by different companies, so to get them to agree to do it was very tough. But in the case of like Aliens versus Predator, they were both owned by Fox, so that was quite easy. But the actual final product, it wasn't worth it, to tell the truth.
There you go.
No, it's true. Yeah.
We always have to have a podcast where the Alien franchise gets mentioned somewhere. I mean, we already mentioned Star Wars earlier. So Star Wars and Alien are one of a number of touchstones that we've got. So it always makes me chuckle inside when they get mentioned. It's like, yay. So, and we've talked about Halloween as well, which is definitely one of my favorite films of all time. Definitely my favorite slasher film of all time, for sure. So,
nice. Yeah, it's a good choice.
Yeah.
Yes. And of course, we've got a new one of those coming this year, which is going to be interesting to see where they go with it.
I'm very excited. I probably have too high expectations at the moment, but I am very excited for it.
Yeah, the bit that I'm not too sure about, because this is the trouble. I don't want to read too much because I don't like spoilers or knowing anything before I see it. But what I'm not sure is whether or not this is ignoring Halloween 2 or whether it's carrying on 40 years after that. Because to me, I always, again, I know it's a different director and a slightly different tone of film and whatever, but because of the way I watched it as a kid, I saw them back to back. So to me, Halloween 1 and 2 is one film. To me, that's one whole story.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether the idea of this is it's 40 years on from when he's gone over the balcony and landed on the lawn and then disappeared, or whether it's 40 years on since the explosion in the hospital in part 2. So and I'm frightened to Google it too much in case I get too many spoilers and stuff. I just want to know sort of. I know it's ignoring the rest of the franchise, which is fine, but I just wanted to know whether it's including the second film or not. So
I don't know if anyone knows that for sure. Yeah, it will be intriguing to see. We'll have to see, because I think like you say, it's a difficult thing, I think, to ignore Halloween 2, because then it's it's going to reinvent everything from that point on the balcony onwards, from where he disappears from the front garden onwards, which is would be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, they sort of did it with H2O. In fact, it's scary that we're already at H40 now. And I remember H2O like it was only a few weeks back.
It still feels like the recent one, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It's like shit, because we obviously ignore all the Rob Zombie stuff. Because
of course,
he totally missed the point with those films. But
yes. Of course, yeah.
It's a massive subject. It is a massive subject.
It is.
So okay. In that case, Mike, please let us know for any listeners we've got that are still with us. How can they? I really recommend listening to your podcast, because it's on my. I listen to it every week.
Thank you very much.
I've subscribed, and I think I like the way you've got great guests. And you're spending a lot of time, all your episodes are feature length as well. You're spending a lot of time on the various stages of the evolution of this and the history of this. And I find that as a filmmaker and a fan of horror films, really interesting and informative. And also I'm kind of rediscovering and discovering more films as it goes along, because I'm kind of watching them with you. As if I haven't got enough homework to do for this podcast. There you go. So
I know.
I've just got no life. I just watch movies, So I'm going with that. But where can people find this? Where do they have to go?
Thank you very much. Well, yeah, it's you can find it on all the usual podcast places, iTunes, obviously, and whatever other Stitcher, whatever other podcast app you use. So it's called The Evolution of Horror, and you can find Twitter. We're on Twitter at Evolution Pod, and there's also a Facebook page. There's a little nice discussion group on Facebook as well that's got, I think, 200 odd members at the moment, and they all talk about all the films every week. So it's really nice. It's like getting a little sort of community now as well, which is good. So yeah, you can find us on all those different sort of platforms.
Wow, you're doing all the stuff we should be doing.
It really does. It sucks your life.
Or I should be doing, because Simon does most of it.
Yeah.
It's only because I haven't got a life, that's all.
Yeah, you and me both. There we go.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
It's all right. It's a pleasure. And Keith, where can people find your work?
Okay, if you go onto YouTube and put in British Eyles, that's Eyles, as in my last name, you can see short films that I've written, produced, and directed on there, and you can get in touch with us via the podcast.
And as always, you can find my work at independentrunnings.com. You can listen to this podcast on Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, and all good podcast providers. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search Movie Heaven, Movie Hell. And please leave us a rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher. It all helps. So,
Doesn't it?
It does. So, just again, want to thank our guest, Mike, for coming on.
Thank you very much.
And hopefully you will join us for the next episode of Movie Heaven, Movie Hell.